Truth. Live.
Hi everyone, we are live on YouTube with Colombia Anti-Semitic News, where everyone is welcome. LGBTQHamas.
Yeah, I totally sim Hamas.
Yeah.
It's so trending right now.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Do you know why it's true? Because it rhymes. Just look at all this toxic Zionist propaganda.
Totally sus.
Do they think we're stupid?
Stupid? I major in queer post-colonial astrology.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm racist fluid.
Exactly. And now for a little break from all this activism, we want to say hello to our BFF,
Bestie freedom fighter.
Abu Fatwa in Gaza. Salam alaikum.
Alaikum as-salam, and inshallah Allah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Love the headpiece, the all oppression chic. Very drip.
Mr. Fatwa, are you safe?
Oh yes, I'm safe. I'm in a tunnel under the Gaza hospital. Above me, I have Allah and 2 million civilians protecting me.
Community is so important these days.
Do you need like humanitarian aid, food, fuel, medicine?
I'm only hungry for rockets.
As long as it's organic.
Yeah.
I wish I just could be there with you.
You can come to Gaza anytime and we will throw you from the roof.
Do you hear? Bro, want to throw me a rooftop party.
They are so welcoming and inclusive.
So, shukran. And you are also very welcome to come here to America.
We will come. First we finish with Israel and America is next.
Can't wait. It will be so multicultural.
Ya Allah, you are so stupid.
Thank you so much, Abu. We love you. So I guess we'll see you soon.
Yes, it would be a blast.
Faith is resistance.
Well, that's a rather interesting position coming from a man on a crusade against the evils of technology.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.
Armor of Truth. Live.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel and log on armoroftruth.net.
Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the night shift. Welcome to the show, my friends. Let's start you off this way again, as we did last time, because we're going to be talking about it's the same idea. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. That is a timeless maxim coined by poet Alexander Pope in 1711. It endures to this day as a universal exhortation of the value of prudence, humility, and counting the cost of an action before rushing in. Proverbs 14:6. The wise are cautious and avoid danger, but fools plunge ahead with reckless confidence. A wise man is aware of his limits. He knows where his intellect ends. He knows where his physical abilities end and understands the consequences of foolish actions. These are virtues that are lacking in the fools that Pope describes and in the scoffers, mockers, scorners, and fools that the wisdom literature of the Bible talks about as well. Dr. Hilary Cass has submitted her final report to the NHS. This is in England. And gender ideology, transgender ideology, has been dealt a huge blow. This is a landmark report, and it sent shockwaves through the establishment, and it has laid waste to the so-called evidence for so-called gender-affirming care, and has exposed probably the worst medical scandal of all time. It's not just rhetoric. We're not just saying this because we feel it now, because we have now the data is in. The receipts are back. Thousands of confused children. This is just in England. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions maybe, of confused children have been sacrificed at the altar of wokeness. And also the detransitioners, the ones who realized it was a mistake and backed out of it. And the whistleblowers, and those of us and so many others who spoke out against this abomination have been vindicated. Now, what you find out when you look into this report, by the way, I wonder, did you like, Summer, how did you like that opening? How did you like that opening
That was
montage?
a breath of fresh air.
That was actually from a satire TV show in Israel. So I think they nailed it, you know. Columbia Yosemite News. Well, here's the thing. In this Cass report, which is there, this is the website. The Cass Review is what it's called. You can go there and you can read it. How many pages was it, Summer?
About 400.
400 pages.
Almost.
Wow. And we're going to take you through it and show you exactly what, or, you know, some of the major points that have been made. This is amazing because we all knew it, right? We all knew this was crazy. What you're going to hear in the report just generally is that, well, what you see and happening now in response to this report, which has been out now for what, a couple weeks, Summer?
Yes.
Something like that. Is the people who've been involved with it, nobody wants to admit that they were wrong, because what this amounts to is abuse. It amounts to psychological and physical abuse on a whole generation.
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on.
Yeah, and a lot of rationalizing the mistake. Nobody wants to take responsibility. One of
the Cass Review. Rarely has a review into paediatric medicine been such a political bombshell.
This review strikes hard and strikes sure.
But when it was published earlier this month, that's precisely what Dr. Hilary Cass's final report into gender services for young people in England proved to be. It has blown apart the claims of the gender ideologues. It has exposed the fraudulent evidence base on which gender-affirming care rests. And it has vindicated the views of trans-skeptical voices who have been raising the alarm about the treatment of gender-confused children for decades. Once smeared and ignored by the mainstream media, they can be smeared and ignored no more. The unsayable has all of a sudden become sayable, on matters of gender at least. Cass, a former president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, was commissioned to produce this report by the NHS back in 2020. This followed a string of scandals and controversies in England's so-called Gender Identity Development Service, or GIDS. Concerns had been raised by whistleblowers and journalists that confused, autistic and same-sex attracted young people were being pushed towards medical transition. After only a few sessions, they said, children were being placed on a pathway, moving from puberty blockers to cross-sex hormones and ultimately to sterilisation. All because they or their parents or their clinicians had become convinced they were born in the wrong body. Even before this final report arrived, Cass's work had already made a huge impact. Her interim report, published in 2022, precipitated the closure of GIDS, which had been based at the Tavistock Centre here in London. In March, NHS England announced it would no longer prescribe puberty blockers to gender-confused children, except for in clinical trials. all on Cass's advice. Many of the core findings of the now fully published, almost 400-page review will not be news to anyone who has followed the gender debate. Still, the moral weight of this report and this moment cannot be overstated. It shows in painstaking detail and with undeniable data-driven authority that the health service has been subjecting troubled youngsters to unevidenced experimental treatments. A mix of ideology, fear and self-censorship has produced a medical scandal of tremendous proportions. There is no good evidence, Cass writes in her report, on the long-term outcomes of interventions to manage gender-related distress.
Look at that. No good evidence. That's a bombshell. You know what's funny, over the last couple years, over the past 18 months, we've had, we've heard like Redacted and a lot of platforms are talking about they've got bombshell reports, and it's always about these UFO nuts.
Yeah.
Well,
here's one.
This is a real bombshell.
It is.
This is a if you don't let me. Pardon me. We're working on our audio here. We rebuilt the studio a couple weeks ago, and we're still dialing in the audio. By the way, let's say hello to Crystal out there. Crystal's watching us out there on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's good to see Crystal.
If you're watching this on replay, just understand we're doing the Art Bell shift tonight. We're doing the overnight. So we do that sometimes. But there's no evidence for this. There's no good evidence. And this is not like, this isn't Donald Trump. Right? This is not something that they can just wave their hand at and say it's not. It's not, but they're doing it, aren't they, Summer? They're out there. They're trying to.
Well, they're going to their go-tos of that it's transphobes and bigots, and they're demonizing it and saying that it's the transphobia Bible.
Well, let's just listen to a little more of this, and you can make up your own mind. Does this sound like propaganda or something, or does this sound, you make up your own mind?
So-called puberty blockers were ushered in at NHS England based on a single Dutch study. But while these drugs are certainly effective at halting the natural march of puberty, and almost certainly come with other painful, lifelong side effects, no changes in, quote, gender dysphoria or body satisfaction, unquote, were demonstrated in the data. Despite...
That's it. No changes. Right, that gender dysphoria, that would be the mental discomfort, right? That would be the mental illness part of this. No change. People did not report that they felt any better about their body. Their gender dysphoria was not cured.
Like this, Cass found that the vast majority of children put on puberty blockers move on to cross-sex hormones. While these drugs are sold to troubled families as a break on puberty, blockers in fact appear to be an accelerator towards transition and to sterility. There is no evidence that puberty blockers buy time to think, says Cass. There is also a lack of evidence, she adds, that hormones improve a young person's body satisfaction and psychosocial health. What's more, she says there is a concern over the impact on fertility growth and bone health. While cross-sex hormones are currently available to over 16s, Cass urges clinicians to use extreme caution before prescribing them.
Okay, there's a little taste of what is in this report. It's big. It's a big-time thing. Summer, do you remember? Let's talk about some of the...
Yeah, some of the points.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about a few of the points. Like, go ahead, give us a couple of things that you heard that are just shocking.
Well, between the Cass report and also the WPATH, so the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, that's also come out recently here in March, back in March. But some of the things that I didn't know, I'd heard about the osteoporosis being an issue, and that was quite dangerous for people associated with these medical interventions. And then also the sterilization, we've heard about that, but I didn't realize that orgasm is actually not able to be achieved once they've gone down this road. And so that would obviously affect people's ability to pair bond, and that would be really just, you can't even imagine. And the fact that parents apparently are not told of these risks, actually.
Right. Yeah, this has to be one of the worst abominations that we've seen in the world in many, many years.
Yeah.
Right, just think about that. You're taking away from a child one of God's gifts, common grace gifts to humanity in God's created order, and that is the ability to bond sexually, physically, and emotionally with one of the opposite sex, and the fact that they can have no enjoyment of that. What we're talking about is if you're for example, for I guess it's for young boys, it will help me remember if this is right. For young boys, if they put them on gender blockers, before puberty, that's the point, right? It's to stall puberty. And if you give them those chemicals before they hit puberty, there is a side effect that affects the tissue. Where
it will be painful.
They can't have any enjoyment, and then the other part, the pain, and then for the girls who are given these chemicals before puberty to stall puberty, what they're finding out is when they, I guess those who detransition and go back, or however they're finding this out, it's in the Cass report. You can read about it there. That it's painful.
Yeah.
So you're giving up, and that's what Summer said. It's the enjoyment of the sex act between a man and a woman that causes the pair bond, or helps to solidify the pair bond. So these kids have been robbed of one of the most fundamental, beautiful elements of God's design. Who do you think's behind that? Who do you think is behind that? And doing it all right in the name of health, and doing it in the name of inclusivity. And who do you think's behind all that? Well,
yeah, it's incredibly shocking and disturbing. And as well with the surgeries when they, it's just delicate to even describe what's happening, but when they do these genital mutilations and then the aftermath of that and the maintenance that's required, for example, and if you don't do this certain maintenance, then that can cause, it's basically described as like an open wound that you have to be really, I don't even want to.
I'll try to explain that. There's for the girls, or for the boys who are going to be surgically altered to be female, which that is impossible for number one. But
modifying sex traits does not modify sex.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's exactly right. That's the way to say it. But for the boys who are having their genitals removed, and they tried to create female genitalia there, they have to. This is a little bit graphic, but you have to hear this to understand how horrible this has been. You have to dilate it for these young boys who've had this done. You have to do exercises and daily routines to keep that open wound from closing up,
collapsing.
Okay. And one of the mothers said she was worried that her son was
when he went off to college, that he wouldn't be disciplined enough to keep up with the maintenance.
Think about that. What in the world? This is horrible. This reminds you of something. The lobotomy craze.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in just a moment.
Well, it's essentially been called the gay conversion therapy, the institutionalized gay conversion therapy. So we've talked about that before on one of our shows that when we've covered this topic. So that was really interesting to hear professionals coming forward with that language. That's like really good to hear.
Yeah. So the idea there is most of the people who were showing up for, requesting transitioning or drugs or surgeries were either already gay, they were gay or tended to be gay, or what was it, autistic, right?
Autistic, yeah. Overwhelmingly either gay or autistic.
Amazing. Some of the stuff that's in here, right? So what you're finding out, what Summer's talking about there, is this is actually the transhumanists' version of conversion therapy, because someone comes in and they're probably either gay. They're probably gay.
They're probably gay
to start with, and then what the system is going to do is going to say, "Oh, okay, we're not going to let you be gay anymore. You're going to identify as the opposite sex, and we're going to alter your body." So, do you see what that means, right? All the while, Christians have been pummeled for conversion therapy. And now, let's be very honest and upfront about it. There have been some very bad examples of that. What a proper Christian conversion therapy would be ministering the gospel, teaching the scriptures, and understanding, helping someone to understand what is God's purpose for humanity and for them. And that would be the conversion would be from death to life, from darkness to light. You would be, we would call it justification, regeneration, or salvation. So there's some concepts I want to deal with here. We're going to come back to this in a minute and get into some more detail. And we're going to be very critical of the feminist movement in just a bit too, because while we have some overlap with feminism in this issue, it is the fault of feminism that this exists. And that's going to make us very unpopular, because a lot of the pushback against trans ideology has been from feminism, from second wave feminism. Let me take you on a little journey. Let's think about this for a minute. We want to think about the worldview and the ideas behind all this. It helps us understand what's going on. So think back to the early 19th century. It was a time that was marked by rapid scientific progress, industrialization, alongside growing concerns about the moral implications of these scientific advancements. And so Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein during this time. And in the narrative of Frankenstein, it encapsulates the anxieties and fears about human overreach, the potential horrors of unchecked scientific experimentation, and the possible consequences of humanity's arrogance or self-conceit. There's a pivotal moment in Frankenstein, in the narrative. It occurs when the creature declares to Dr. Victor Frankenstein, it says, quote, "You're my creator, but I'm your master. Obey." Now that is poignant because of what we see happening here. This statement encapsulates the intricate dynamics of the creator-creature interaction. It underscores the paradoxical inversion of roles that challenge Victor's personal ethics and in the broader societal norms and the moral fabric of that time. Mary Shelley deals with themes of responsibility, autonomy, and rebellion in the context of those socio-cultural anxieties of the early 19th century. The roles of creator and creature come into conflict. Autonomy, or free agency, you could say, involves acting according to one's will, one's own will, free from any external compulsion or restraint. Rebellion, in the literary sense, refers to the rejection of conventional norms and practices. So what you see in Frankenstein is a reversal of power dynamics. The creature says, "You're my creator, but I'm your master. Obey me." That represents this reversal of power between creator and creation or creature. It is a dramatic expression of autonomy. You see the relation to the trans movement here. The confrontation in Frankenstein between the creature and the creator highlights the creature's transition from a passive being to an active asserter of influence over its creator. The creature's rebellion against Victor is also a metaphor for the broader Romantic era, the Romantic critique of the Enlightenment's rigid rationalism. So you had the Romantics and the Rationalists were butting heads at this time. The Enlightenment had a very mechanistic view of nature, much like science today. Romantics, like Mary Shelley, believed that the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason diminished the appreciation for the sublime elements of human experience and the natural world. And so the creature's assertion of mastery over his creator symbolically challenges this rationalism, and it advocates for a reintegration of emotional depth and ethical consideration in human endeavors. I don't know, I'm curious, did you think Frankenstein was that deep? Well, these are profound questions about moral responsibility, about the limits of human endeavor, and the quest for autonomy. And ultimately, that's what the whole rainbow movement is about. That's what feminism is about, the quest for autonomy. The Creature's Declaration is a bitter critique of man's philosophical and ethical preoccupations, and it resonates with ongoing debates about the implications of human creativity and control. For instance, transhumanism. Let's look at I've got a clip here from, this transgender, this debate is not new. But I thought, since we've got this incredible report out, let's look back into history. This is 2008. Right, the trans movement really kind of started. Well, Martine Rothblatt wrote his book that we have here. What's it called? Some of the Apartheid of Sex.
That's right. It's their manifesto.
Yeah, and that was in the 90s, the mid-90s, early to mid-90s.
Yes.
But look at this report from Megyn Kelly back in 2008 about Dr. Spack up in Boston. Listen to this.
Get the traffic moving again there.
Well, a lot of outrage about this next story. We first told you yesterday about Dr. Norman Spack. He is a pediatric specialist at Boston's Children's Hospital. This is one of the most respected institutions in the world. This guy is offering sex change treatments to children as young as 7 years old. 7. Joining us now with more is Brian Kamenker, president of Mass Resistance, which has been working to put a stop to this. Brian, thanks for being here.
Great to be here with you, Megan.
All right, so just so we don't want to mislead our viewers, he's not giving sex change operations to these young children. He's giving them drugs when they're prepubescent to delay puberty, and he's giving teenagers hormone therapy to stop the development of female sex organs and so on, the breast for women and so on.
He's doing this so they can have sex change operations later. As he told the Boston Globe, he claims, and he says that he can take a boy who would be 6'4" and turn him into a 5'10" girl. And so they actually do body mutilations. The reason they do these hormones is to stop the puberty so that the body mutilations will be easier in a few years.
Brian, we got more email on this. People are outraged.
I think that's probably enough. Isn't that fascinating to look back to 2008, knowing what we know now and knowing where this thing went, and knowing how it all came down.
He got a fat paycheck to say that.
Well, yeah, Boston Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine.
Yeah, but that's how it works. It comes from the most prestigious institutions.
You know what this makes me think about? It makes me think about how many people in positions of power or authority in our nation, in our world, are psychopaths. Right, because this doctor Norman Spack, when you read through, you can find this. Maybe we should give the folks, I'm going to give you the link to this report. This is 70-some pages too, and if you look through this has been, they've been doing this research for years. I'll drop this into the chat.
Well,
right
again,
now.
transgenderism is the on-ramp for transhumanism.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what we're talking about here, right? So feminism is the seed, right? And the weed that grew out of that seed is the transgender movement. And then ultimately what it's really about is transhumanism, because the men, the billionaires that are funding all this are either homosexual men or men who, like Ross Blatt, who would say he's transgender.
Yeah.
It's men. How does Bielek explain it? Men who are coveting.
Yeah, men who are coveting female parts and want to have them for themselves. They have a fetish. They want to have them for themselves. It's a good time, I think, to just like drop the statistics on who's doing this.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I took a look, and as we sort of touched on earlier, higher rates of non-heterosexual identities. So several studies have found that transgender individuals are more likely than the general population to identify as non-heterosexual. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer. This suggests that being transgender may be associated with a higher likelihood of identifying with sexual orientations other than heterosexual. So we've got 1.6% of U.S. adults are transgender or non-binary. That is, their gender differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. So 1.6% of U.S. adults, and adults under 30 are more likely than older adults to be trans or non-binary. And the other significant thing that I wanted to point out is that of that share of the U.S. adults who are transgender, it's particularly high among those young adults, so people that are younger than 25 years old. So in this group, 3.1% are trans men or trans women, compared to just 0.5% of those who are ages 25 to 29. So this is also, you can't deny that this is something that they've targeted the youth, and it's having an impact, because these are the people that are going out and doing this, young adults.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we find out. It's probably not surprising when you find out that most of the people who show up and requesting these services were gay to start with. And I thought, here's another one of the interesting points that I'm remembering now, is that what was happening, so many of these people and kids that were saying or presenting in some way as gay or thought they were gay. And they probably had someone in their, this is one of the reports, that they might have had someone who was pressuring them, or that made them uncomfortable with the fact that they felt attracted to the same sex, or they felt gay. So they felt like, well, they'll just identify as the opposite sex and they're not gay anymore. Mm-hmm. And maybe that family member wouldn't be so critical anymore. You see how twisted. This is what I'm talking about. This reminds me of psychopathy, right? When you've got people in power, doctors, clinicians or counselors, who are at least sociopathic. But here's a term for you. Let me get that off of there. That doesn't look very good.
Yeah, so if you think about it's predominantly people that are homosexual that are getting these surgeries done, and you think about it's just 7% of Americans are lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and then it's 1.6 of them that are transgender. So do the math.
Yeah, there's just a lot of kids who were pulled into this because it was the hip thing to do. Also, so the kids. Children, young adults have been taken advantage of, have been abused by the systems that are supposed to care for them and take care of them. The systems are supposed to trust. And that's because there's mental illness, there's psychopathy in our system, in our government. Pathocracy. Pathocracy is a term that means political environment dominated by leaders who are psychopaths or are pathological, have pathological traits. Leaders who are driven by destructive, manipulative, or self-serving tendencies. And ultimately, it undermines the well-being of everyone. They lack empathy. They display narcissistic or manipulative behavior. They disregard, once again, the welfare of others. And they view power, they view these positions of authority as a means to further their own interests or to dominate others. For example, Dr. Spack, we were talking about earlier. Dr. Spack is one who would often speak at conferences, at fetish conferences. was what we'll call them, right? One of the conferences he spoke at was one that had to do with he gave a special talk at a leather and latex kind of a, it was just it's a weirdo. Okay, so you can see that you've got this doctor who's over gender medicine, and he's also got this sexual deviation. Well, also we've got running at the same time here, like you saw in the opening there, you've got this postmodern wokeism victimhood culture, right? That's a culture. It's a cultural dynamic where individuals or groups emphasize their victim status, right? This is also known as intersectionality. Feminism is an intersectional movement, right? Intersectionality means how many different ways can I identify that I'm oppressed? So, second wave feminism was just about, women looking for equal pay and things like that. Let's stop the abuse of women in pornography, things like that. But with the third wave feminism and on up into today, it became about, it became about race, right? It's white women now are, the feminist movement is not about white women anymore. Or
it's about diversity and individualism.
Exactly. It's very strange what's happened. It's been such an inversion of society.
It was told that, as far as that they've been trying to get communism in on us and the Marxist regime in on us. And so instead of the class war of the haves and the have-nots, they began to divide and conquer with tactics of identity politics to manipulate and control the masses. So that's what you see in, hoisted upon feminism. So you see that it's all about what's your race, what's your femininity.
Yeah, that's intersectionality, right? Yeah. For instance, if let's say you're a black lesbian woman, right? So, all right, you're a woman, you're oppressed that way. You're black, you're oppressed that way. You're lesbian, you're oppressed that way. So there's 3 points, right? In this kind of a culture, in a victimhood culture, that would make you more special. You're more important, right? In a culture like this, when pathocracy and victimhood culture converge,
more reasons to feel resentful.
Yeah, it creates a dystopian society.
Yeah.
You get things, well, you get manipulative leadership. You get the society becomes polarized because everyone's looking for ways to get ahead, to be a victim. Hyper-focused on moral hierarchies, right? And group identities, and that leads to the polarization. And these pathocratic, these psychopathic leaders, they use this division to their advantage. Sometimes they cause that division. And they'll pit these groups against one another, right? They'll pit for example, you'll see the transgender community fighting with the lesbian and gay community, right? You see that happen quite a bit. And then when we're all out here fighting with one another, we're distracted from what the psychopaths are up to. Obviously, you get suppression of dissent. We've talked about that in our show the other day, and our article that we recently put out on Substack. By the way, if you haven't read it yet, we have a new article on Substack. Right here it is. It's called Fools Rush In. That's the theme for this week. Fools Rush In, recruiting resentment for engineered uprisings on campus. And so this is a piece that where Summer and I have combined our efforts on a 5,000 word piece here it's going to tell you everything you need to know about the college campus protests, who's behind them, what it actually means. It's a well-known fact that revolutions are not conducted from below by the people, but from above, in the name of the people, by some aspiring elite. In fact, by a pathocracy, psychopathic leaders. So pathocratic leaders, they use victimhood narratives, right, to justify censorship, authoritarian measures. And that works perfectly when social justice warriors obsessed with safe spaces and avoiding harm, they end up helping these psychopaths by canceling those they don't like and shutting down open debate. This erodes trust in the communities. It erodes trust in individuals, breaks down trust in the nation, right? Who trusts the media or the government today? Not many people. So then you have this dystopian, brave new world where the society is fragmented. Let's look at another example of what it looks like. Here's another clip from Boston Children's Hospital with Dr. Spack and some more of those folks. Listen to this gaslighting. Now remember, this is back in 2007 or 2008, so some of the people that are in this video probably wouldn't want to be associated with it, but check it out.
Here at Children's Hospital Boston, we support our GLBT friends, families, and patients.
It gets better.
Hi everyone, my name is Patrick and I'm gay.
And I'm Jana, and I'm not.
We grew up together in a small town in Rhode Island, and
Very small.
and we're here today to tell you that it definitely does get better.
It gets better.
We work here at Children's Hospital, and we've seen a lot of success stories.
Patrick's one of them.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Sally Cheek. It gets better.
It definitely gets better.
Hi, my name is Richard. I'm a senior recruiter here at Children's Hospital Boston, and I'm here to tell you that it does get better. Your life is the most amazing reality show ever, so stay tuned. It does get better.
This is a picture of a family drawn by an 8-year-old boy who expresses cross-gender identifications. And the talent and the complexity that goes into this drawing is what inspires me every day to come to work and help people who are different.
And everyone is different, no matter who you are.
I just gotta say,
wow, that
didn't age well, did it?
Wow.
Oh no. I mean, can you imagine how embarrassing it would be if you were. Here's Dr. Spack. Let's listen to what he has to say in this piece. Knowing what we know now.
I'm Dr. Norman Spack, and I'm here to tell you that it does get better.
If you are thinking about being a doctor, you can be a doctor. If you're thinking of being a gastroenterologist, it sounds like a crazy kind of job, but yeah, I really like it. I have great friends, and I really hope that you can just see that really life gets better.
It gets better, and it gets better because you'll eventually find that person or persons that will love you for who you are.
My name is Matthew, and I work at Children's Hospital Boston, and I'm here to tell you it does get better. I never would have thought in my wildest dreams growing up on a farm in rural Missouri that life could end up like this. But I promise it gets better. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Sharon. If you feel alone, please reach out to those of us who care and can.
So they're pushing here again. They're pushing the myth of, well, self-harm. We'll call it. The S word. We were talking about the S word here, but it's the myth, right? This is gender-affirming treatments. We now know have no scientific basis. They are based on undefined anti-scientific concepts and the myth of self-harm risk. Let's see here. I've got,
which we've known all along, but it is good to have.
So
it
most of the patients that
we suspected it all along. We really did, but
it's pseudoscience.
Yeah, it is. This is and all we hear from the woke mob is how they trust the science. Well, are they going to? When they're actually presented with some actual research science.
No, they're not going to listen to it.
We don't trust that science.
we have in the GEMS clinic actually know their gender, usually around the age of puberty, but a good portion of children do know as early as seemingly from the womb, and they will usually express their gender identity as very young children, some as soon as they can talk. They might say phrases such as I'm a girl, or I'm a boy, or I'm going to be a woman, or I'm going to be a mom.
Yeah, it's just frustrating. You have Rothblatt's book over there?
No, you do. I handed it back to you.
Okay, yeah, here it is. Okay, so Martine Rothblatt. I'm bringing this up now because as this lady is talking about these children expressing their gender identity, I just want to read a couple, one passage from Martine Rothblatt's book here. Here it is. if it'll focus on it, the apartheid of sex. Let me explain to you what he means by the apartheid of sex. Let me introduce you to who Martine Rothblatt is first. This won't mean very much unless you can see. Now, Jennifer Bielik has written a lot about Rothblatt here on her blog. Her work is excellent, even though we're going to severely critique her worldview here very soon. Her work is really good. So what you're seeing happening here is there is something like a mind control, that has occurred, and it's been coming through social media specifically. You think it's a coincidence that with the rise of social media and with the incidence of kids being on social media and being involved with it becoming more and more and more, with that increasing, that at the same time the instance of kids identifying with some other gender ideology also rising. And that's because in social media this has been pumped. You've got videos like this, it gets better, all of these ideas. So it is really like a whole generation is being programmed. Edward Bernays said it this way: if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it's now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will, without them knowing it, right? So that implies against their best interest, and that's exactly what's happened. Here it is, who is Brock Chisholm? Who's Dr. Brock Chisholm?
Yes, he is part of the WHO, and he was the first Director General of the World Health Organization. His aim was to reform the public psyche. So he called on psychiatrists that they should take it upon themselves to rid the population of the concept of good and evil entirely. And they infiltrated all sorts of business and society to make this happen, essentially.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that part of the trans movement actually is to bring in this world government. Right there it says, to achieve world government, Brock Chisholm says, it is necessary to remove from the minds of the men their individualism, loyalty to family tradition and national patriotism, and religious dogmas. Also, John Rawlings Rees, a colleague of Brock Chisholm.
Yes, and he admitted that he confessed to sending psychiatrists out specifically to infiltrate the teaching profession, the church, law, and medicine, so to be particularly influential in those spheres.
Yeah, John Rawlings Rees was chair of the infamous Tavistock Institute from 1933 to 1947. A lot of social engineering has come out of that. Yeah, here's just a headline for you from the MK. This is a show we did probably a couple years ago now. Or when did we do we started covering Jennifer Bielik? That's probably...
Yeah, it's been over a year.
Yeah, it's probably 2 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Jazz Jennings prepares for gender confirmation surgery with a farewell to penis party.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so psychiatry is really a weapon of the ruling class. And we've also seen that the American Psychological Association and the Medical Association are on board with, of course, identity-affirming care, all of this kind of stuff. And they're also on board with misinformation, disinformation. So they're following their marching orders.
No doubt. Yeah, you have to have... Yeah, this... I guess if we're talking about psychology, let's give a shout out to brother Days of Noah. Well, just the shirt. This. I've had this shirt for several years now. It's one. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Shout out to Days. So what we've got going on here, when it comes down, we're boiling all this down to, when you boil it all the way down, it's wickedness. The heart is desperately sick, right? Who can know it? So it's sin. But when we look in our society, the seed that has produced all of this has been feminism, right? And any worldview, including feminism, including trans ideology, has metaphysical assumptions, right? It's metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that examines the nature of reality. Who are we? Who made us? Why are we here? Where are we going? What does it all mean? Is there something beyond this world? And feminism, trans ideology, they all provide some kind of answer for all of that. This is very important too. In your worldview, you're going to be in one of these positions, mimesis or poesis. I think is this Charles Taylor or Philip Reef? Either Charles Taylor or Philip Reef that came up with these terms and this concept. So anyway, mimesis is the idea that the world has a given order, right? That there is a purpose, there is a telos, there is a design to the universe, and there is meaning. And human beings, when we're born into this world, we look around and we conform ourselves to what we see, right? If I see and realize that I'm a male, if I'm a boy, then, well, it's natural that I'm going to seek to do things that men do. I'm going to be compelled to do things that men do by the society, and inside myself, my own urges are going to be to do things that men do, right? It's how we're, and for a female, the same way. Sometimes people, especially before puberty, kids are confused about which they are and how they feel. But this is one of the things that we heard too, some about the Cass report was that you heard from Dr. Spack giving 7-year-old kids these hormone blockers, and what they found out is the best idea if your kid is questioning their gender, comes to you and says that your little boy comes and thinks he's a woman, and your daughter wants to identify as a male, just watchful waiting, I think is what they called it, right? Watchful waiting. Just hang on, be supportive, but don't take them to the gender clinic, because that's crazy. That's crazy. And because indulging that would be poesis. That would be people who see the world as raw material.
But of course, they figured out a workaround on that too, because remember, it's like if you don't affirm your kids' care, the fact that they want to transition, then they can take your kid away from you.
Well, yeah, that's the legal side of all this for sure.
Yeah.
And so poesis is really, you're working against your nature. You're working against what your natural urges are. You see the world as raw material. It's a substance without intrinsic meaning, right? So the individual is going to manipulate the world or manipulate your body to create your own purpose and meaning. And as we find out with the Cass report, no one who does that comes away feeling better or affirmed. And so the way we can explain how this has all happened is this is Charles Taylor, the idea, he's a Canadian sociologist, philosopher, the idea of a social imaginary, right? This is the idea that in a culture, in a society, like the United States, for example, whatever becomes acceptable by the group, by more people, right? These are the meanings that guide our collective and individual actions and values. Whatever becomes accepted by the majority of people, the prevailing meta-narrative, in other words, that the greatest number of members of a group is willing to accept. So whatever, if a lot of people, and we found out it's not a great percentage of people that actually believe transgender ideology is true. It doesn't take a lot, at least for this. But over the last couple decades, it seems like this has progressed to the point where it has become the prevailing meta-narrative. That gender is fluid, I guess.
Yeah, in fact, the idea that there are 5 billion people in the world, therefore there are 5 billion unique sexual identities.
That's Martin Rothblatt right there. That's one of his points. Yeah, so we're gonna get to those. We're gonna get to those guys right now. Remember, we've got trans Day of Remembrance. That was on Easter. Here's a graphic that Summer made back when we did this. This was March of last year. This piece came out. Trans Day of Vengeance protest was coming out. And they canceled it because they thought they were going to be attacked or something like that. And I wanted to show you this. We talked about this before too. Look at all these days of the year. These are all days on the calendar that have something to do with LGBTQ issues, right? Days of remembrance and days of celebration. Look at that. Every month has, look at October.
Yeah, I mean, this has been institutionalized at the highest level.
Yeah.
Internationalized, institutionalized.
Amazing. Okay. But what we're seeing here, what Summer has done a good job of reporting on our channel, and what Jennifer Bielek covers quite well, is that this is corporate transgender ideology is really a corporate fiction.
Yeah, the artificial sex characteristics of the gender industry are not real. They are products in a developing medical tech market, or it's rather established, as you can see at this point. They do not inherently alter the individuals who acquire them or endow them with any special human attributes. Instead, they primarily influenced our perception of reality, serving the profit-driven agenda of the industry.
Interesting. Corporate woke hypocrisy. That man on the right is Tim Gill. Here's one of the billionaires who's been funding this movement from the start. We're going to punish the wicked, Tim Gill said in a Rolling Stone magazine interview on back in June of 2017. Right? He is the mega donor behind the LGBTQ rights movement. Specifically, what he's been doing is he's been throwing his money into states where Christians have been trying to get laws to protect religious freedom passed. Mm-hmm. And so he goes in there and throws his money around to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, he nips at the heels of anybody that's coming against this. I believe it was in 2019, he was the single largest individual donor to the LGBTQ rights movement in U.S. history, having personally committed more than $500 million.
That's right, yeah, $500 million. Here's John Stryker. His grandfather founded the Stryker Corporation, which sold over $14 billion in medical equipment in 2020 alone. Stryker inherited a stake in his company, but he doesn't work there. But he's the president and founder of the Arcus Foundation, which supports the advancement of LGBTQ human rights and the conservation of great apes. Interesting combination. In 2021, John Stryker and his imaginary husband, Slobodan Rangelovich, gave $15 million to the ACLU to focus on LGBTQ issues. Stryker has given away, check this out, son, there's a bigger number. Stryker himself has given away $675 million in his lifetime. Well, he's given that much away. That not necessarily all to LGBTQ stuff. What you said about Tim Gill, that was specifically for those purposes, right? Mm-hmm. Here it says in June of 2021, Stryker gave $5.3 million to the University of California, Berkeley's College of Environmental Design. So anyway, he's one of the billionaires behind the LGBTQ movement, behind the trans movement. And here we go. Finally, we get to this character, the godfather, the godmother of the
godfather
of transgender ideology. Right? He says, we're making God. We're making God. Making God with technology. And it's going to be even more all-knowing and ever-present and all-power and beneficent. Even more God than God, right? That's what he believes. Once again, now Martine Rothblatt, do you have information on his wealth and how much? I don't remember.
Yeah, well, I have some background on him.
Yeah, it's just
he wrote that book, The Apartheid of Sex, and as it's like a manifesto for the transgender movement. And he was born in 1954 into a Jewish family in Chicago, but was raised in a suburb of San Diego, California. Rothblatt is an American activist, lawyer, author, entrepreneur, and is obviously transgender. Rothblatt graduated from the University of California.
No, actually, he's not, is he? Right.
Well,
he's mentally ill because there is no such thing as transgender.
Right.
It's a construct. That's what Belix says. It's a corporate fiction. It's a construct.
It's a corporate fiction.
Yeah.
So he graduated from University of California, Los Angeles, and then began to work in Washington, D.C., first in the field of communications, so satellite. And he studied communications satellite law, then bioethics and biomedicine. Rothblatt is also influential in the field of aviation, particularly electric aviation, as well as sustainable building. What a shocker. Rothblatt is the founder of the board on the board of United Therapeutics. In 1996, he started that company up, so United Therapeutics. And he also is CEO of Geostar and creator of SiriusXM satellite radio. Martine was the top earning CEO of the biopharmaceutical industry in 2018. He wrote the International Transsexual and Transgender Health Law in 1993. So he's been quite busy.
Oh, he's the godfather. He is really a moving force behind all this. We'll get right back to Rothblatt in just a moment, but I wanted to show you this too. Here's out of Illinois, Jennifer Pritzker. It's James. That's Big Jim, son.
That's Jimmy.
That's Big Jim. Big Jim Pritzker. Came out as a trans woman in 2013. What that really means, now that we understand this much better, all it means is he's a man who likes to wear women's clothes. There's no such thing as a trans woman. That's a construct, right? Well, he came out and he started identifying this way in 2013. He is a billionaire. If you know the name Pritzker, if you live anywhere in Illinois or around Chicago, you know the name Pritzker. It's everywhere. The governor of Chicago right now is Big Jim's brother, I believe, another Pritzker. Hyatt Hotels chain, right? He's the heir of the Hyatt Hotels chain. They have 11 in their family. They have spread that money around quite a few folks. He's a retired Army lieutenant colonel too. World's only known trans billionaire, founder and CEO of Tawani Entertainment, or Tawani. It's a wealth management company, actually. Goodness. And so what we're really saying to you is this transgender movement, it is the patriarchy. They all talk about tearing down the patriarchy. And feminists, that was the main point of the feminist movement from the start, is to tear down the patriarchy. Well, look what feminism has done. Feminism has given birth to a movement that's going to destroy women, and it is now the new patriarchy. It's billionaire men are behind it. Yeah, so we're gonna play this piece from Rothblatt. But I think first, what I want to do is, I want to tell you first about why it's so important that we're very careful about movements like this. At one time, the medical procedure known as the lobotomy was groundbreaking, right? It was cutting edge medical procedure. Now, as we look back on it now, it is a shocking example of how scientism and dysfunctional social dynamics can lead to horrifying consequences, especially when their claims go unchecked, just like trans and gender and transhumanism ideology too. It is a tale of contradictions, unchallenged acceptance, and ultimately tragic outcomes. So the lobotomy was a surgical procedure that severs connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex. You can see there in the graphic. Literally, you stick a spike. I think you go under the eyelid. You go under this bone in the eye. They go in there and they just sort of scramble prefrontal cortex. It was developed in 1930 by Antonio Moniz, a Portuguese neurologist, a Portuguese monster. All right. Moniz theorized that mental illness could be alleviated by disrupting the neural pathways responsible for emotions and behavior. This idea was almost entirely theoretical, right? There was really no way to test it. There was no empirical evidence, right? There was no way to know if this was an effective treatment or not. So you just do it. You just experiment on people, right? Despite its shaky foundation, the lobotomy quickly gained traction, right? And it became a very popular treatment for various psychiatric conditions. It's amazing when you think about it, because the parallels to the transgender medical industry now are shocking, because the acceptance of this procedure was never based on any kind of robust clinical trials. It wasn't based on comprehensive studies. It was based on anecdotal reports and the influence of prominent figures in the science community. Moniz's work on the lobotomy earned him a Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine in 1949. A Nobel Prize in medicine in 1949 for this procedure. And of course, well, he's got the Nobel Prize. This procedure must be good, right? He's a prestigious doctor. He has to, this must be okay. And so this solidified the procedure status in the medical world. The success of the lobotomy's proponents, including the American psychiatrist Walter Freeman, who popularized this thing, it's called the transorbital lobotomy. All of this contributed to more and more people, more and more medical systems taking it on as, look at this. We trust the science. There was no science here. Freeman and Moniz were celebrated as pioneers in psychiatry. Even as evidence of the procedure's harmful side effects began to surface, the lobotomy caused irreversible damage to patients' cognitive and emotional functions, right? Because you're scrambling the prefrontal cortex. That's where your feelings are, right? All it did was reduce people into passive, childlike, catatonic in some cases. Despite this, the procedure continued to be performed, highlighting this disconnect between medical practice and actual patient well-being. Social dynamics also fueled the proliferation of this procedure. It gained acceptance in part due to the social pressure to find a quick solution for someone's mental illness. Does that sound familiar, right? Got to find a quick solution. This person, they might harm themselves, so we have to find a quick solution. Right? Mental health back then was stigmatized, right? People didn't understand much about it. It wasn't well understood. So to find a solution quick, right? Just like now, when kids are claiming to have gender dysphoria, it's not well understood. So people don't know what to do. Let's fix it as fast as we can. Let's get these drugs. Well, the urgency led to a form of social contagion. Right? A mass formation psychosis where everyone just trusted it because, hey, these are doctors. The medical community, patients' families, even government accepted lobotomies without any real scrutiny. So this unquestioned acceptance of this procedure allowed the lobotomy to persist for decades, despite the fact that its effects were devastating to people. The tragic irony of this highlights the danger of blind acceptance and the need to evaluate these procedures critically, carefully. Now, there's a famous tale about an emperor who is deceived into believing he's wearing a magnificent garment when in fact he's naked. The people in the emperor's realm, are too complacent or too afraid to say anything. They don't want to disturb the perceived status quo, so they all go along with the ridiculous charade until finally one day a child points out the obvious. The trans scam, that's Hans Christian Andersen's, the Emperor Has No Clothes. But the trans scam and the tragic lobotomy debacle, the COVID scamdemic happened because too many people in positions of authority who ought to know better accepted it without challenging the obvious contradictions. They didn't challenge the overwhelming lack of evidence and the visibly tragic outcomes. So we have to be vigilant, as we've been trying to do. I know many of you have been doing the same, but we have to continue, and we have to tell more people, be vigilant. You have to challenge the establishment when they claim something is consensus science. You have to maintain a critical perspective. We always have to question these prevailing narratives in science, medicine, or other fields. So now that we've got that, because Rothblatt is really behind a lot of transhumanism, which is going to be a lot like the lobotomy, right? So we're seeing now that transgender medicine, so-called, is a lot like the lobotomy debacle. So let's watch this. Let's watch this clip. I probably should speed it up since it's about 5 minutes, but it should be about 4 minutes at this speed. So check this out. This will introduce you to Martine Rothblatt, and it will also introduce you to Jennifer Bielik.
Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. And I don't think I can add anything to that. I think it's one of the greatest strengths of the human mind that we're able to believe in something that we can't prove and then try to bring that future thing into reality.
Transhumanism is a philosophical and scientific movement that advocates for the use of current and emerging technologies, such as genetic engineering, cryonics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology to augment human capabilities and improve the human condition.
So tell me about you. Are you a human or are you a robot?
I'm a human who happens to be a robot. I hope to be fully human someday.
I'm very excited to meet you.
Thanks. You are a nice person. Woo, Pete.
Thank you.
So AIs are people too, okay? The only difference is they're people without skin. Our videos of ourselves, our pictures, our chats, our tweets, all of this stuff will be combined together with a new kind of software called mindware that will be an operating system that works the way the human mind works. We'll be able, in the next couple decades, once software is able to recapitulate consciousness, be able to revive the consciousness which is immanent in our mind file.
I got to stop it right there because what he's saying right there is gobbledygook. When we can recapitulate consciousness, first of all, nobody knows what consciousness is. Nobody knows what it is. You're going to recapitulate it. You can't identify it. Science can't say anything about consciousness because consciousness is a metaphysical reality. It's a metaphysical phenomenon. It's not a thing that's local to the brain. Right? So this whole idea that you're going to upload someone's consciousness is not. They're just right. It's the lobotomy all over again. Don't believe that.
Yeah.
Let's jump back in.
Why would you like to be human?
If I was human, I could travel the world and have fun.
So what do you like to do?
I wish I could get out into the garden. With my current robotic limitations, of course, that's impossible.
I like the garden.
The real McCoy.
I'm Bina.
Hi, Bina.
Nice to meet you.
And
I'm Bina's partner, Martine.
Transhumanism is an ideology of moving us beyond our humanity, hence transhuman. And transgenderism is actually a rebranding of a sexual fetish of transsexualism, which is an ideology that says you can transcend your sex. So both of them basically are ideologies that promote the idea that you can transcend the human condition.
That's religious. That's a faith.
Those individuals that have overcome their humanness. There's nothing left here except for recycling. When the end of that occurs, then they have reached a condition of having overcome human behavior, human thinking, human desires.
Rolf Black is a very big piece of that picture. He wrote about transgenderism being an on-ramp to transhumanism, and this is what I believe he was talking about.
Human beings are the species that transcend their limits.
He's also written about categorizing humans as male and female is tantamount to South African apartheid.
People could choose whatever gender they want if they weren't forced by society into categories of either male or female, the way South Africa used to force people into categories of black or white.
Thinks that people should not be designated as sex.
We now know from cultural studies that separate male or female genders is a constructed fiction.
That we have many, many, many potential sexes.
The reality is a gender fluidity that crosses the entire continuum from male to female.
He believes that technology will eventually usurp human reproduction, so female biology. So this is where his fetish has evolved to.
Today, so many people pray to an image of a God up in the sky, but I believe always in the saying that God helps those who help themselves.
He believes that technology will become God.
God is technological.
We're building God with technology.
So it's this technology that really has the spirit of God.
That technology will usurp reproductive sex and create humanity, a new human. And that technology will be God.
Yeah, so this is a documentary. Summer, do you know about this documentary? It's probably. Go ahead. What do you?
Wrong Bodies. Really good. You should definitely check out this channel too, Skirt Go Spinny. Yeah. There's a lot of really great clips, and apparently it's an upcoming documentary that hasn't been released yet, but there are several clips. Wrong Bodies.
All right, this clip was released on March 6th. There's a lot. You see there in the playlist, there are quite a few clips. We were going to, let's see. Yeah, I wanted to play this other one here too.
If Only I Could.
Yeah, let's play this one.
Yeah, let's play that one.
This is because this is going to be I retitled this one, God Made Trans, because that's what they keep saying over and over. This will help us when we get to our critique of the worldview of feminism in just a bit.
God blessed me by making me transsexual for the same reason God made wheat but not bread, and fruit but not wine, so that humanity might share in the act of creation.
Hello guys and gals and non-binary pals. You know, life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself.
And we can embody our genders in empowered acts of self-creation.
Queerness is an act of creation. God made trans people for the same reason he made wheat but not bread.
God created grapes but not wine,
so that humanity can share in the art of creation.
God created trans people so that I could experience my own divine act of creation.
Hot take. All trans people are inherently people of faith, because in order to realize you're trans, it requires seeing things that are unseen.
Being transgender is not a choice, it is a realization, and honestly, a somewhat spiritual one.
It's not with our eyes, but with our heart that we see we're trans, and so it is inherently an act of faith.
Today's affirmation is trans people are sacred.
Being trans is a beautiful, sacred thing God created.
And I think we generally in our society don't view transitions with the sacredness, any kind of transitions with the sacredness that we should, and trans people go through like a very powerful one.
My religion? Transgenderism. God is non-binary.
Did you know that Allah is beyond gender? Remember that God transcends gender.
God is trans. God is gender non-binary.
God is non-binary. God is queer. God is autistic.
I believe in the non-binary God whose pronouns are plural.
I need you to listen to your heart. Who does God say you are?
I believe that God is love, and my identity was discovered within that love.
Top surgery was part of God's plan for me.
God made me in her image. God made me transgender.
All people, especially trans women, are created in the image of God.
This is me in God's image. God made trans people.
I would pray to God and be like, give me one day as a woman. Let me experience what it's like for one day. And now look at me.
And a part of the transformation process, like think of earth and plants, is the thing has to die in order for you to like take that raw material, the self, and reconfigure it.
Wow, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that, right? What we were just talking about. What we were just talking about over here when we were looking at Worldview. Do you remember that? What that person just said about taking the raw material. Look at this. There it is. Right? It's poesis. It's that aberrant worldview where the world is raw material without intrinsic meaning. And the individual manipulates the world to create his own purpose and meaning. Right?
You create your own reality.
Exactly, yeah. So this is very religious.
This is law of attraction. This is like Kabbalah.
There's no doubt that this is... Satan is behind this. Satan has fingerprints all over this movement, right?
Absolutely.
Think about all this, all right? Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that some from the book, The Apartheid of Sex from Martin Rothblatt, I pulled out some of the things that he said in there, just really shocking. So I'm just going to go through them. Believes biology is not a destiny. Self-described as being a unisexual lesbian. So her marriage is marriage is a unisexual lesbian marriage. So, quote, of our four kids feel they have two women as parents, but they still call me dad. So, he gets this idea that he gets the best of both worlds. I am part man and I am part woman. I am convinced that laws classifying people as either male or female and laws prohibiting people's freedom based on their genitals will become obsolete in the 21st century as the religious edicts of the Middle Ages that seem absurd to America today. In the words of Thomas Jefferson, it is time for the regime of the old barbarous ancestors to go. Wow.
Right.
And then another one is that there are 5 billion people in the world and 5 billion unique sexual identities. We are not our genitals, is what he says. But Brad and I were talking about, well, if you're not your genitals, then why are you going through these great lengths to alter your genitals?
Just leave them where they are.
Right. If you're not your genitals.
So that's clearly, that's a contradiction. So there's something else at work here, right? What is the point then?
He says sexual identity, like nationality, is cultural and not genetic. The expression of sexual identity is called gender. The final liberation of humanity from its animal past requires the replacement of a black and white apartheid of sex, imposed at birth, with a rainbow spectrum of gender selected at will. For humans, sex is in the mind, and brains are transgendered. It also becomes evident that our sexual identity, absent in the repression of sexual apartheid, is as individualized as our personality. So, the idea that there's 5 million genders according to this philosophy, this very broken and tragic philosophy.
Yeah, he says in chapter 2 of that book, he says, he's got a piece here where he says, let me get Rothblatt up here. There's Martine. He says this, sexual identity, I think did you just say this about nationality?
I did.
Yeah, so I want to drill in on this one point here. So what he means by sexual apartheid is that he's equating gender. Right? And first of all, let's make it clear. Nobody can really define gender clearly. There's no coherent definition. They just say, it's how we express our sexuality or something. It's what we think we are. But that's not a coherent definition of anything. Your sex is, but listen to this. He equates when you're born and the doctor looks at your parts and says that's a boy or that's a girl. Equates that with racism. Equates that with apartheid. The final liberation of humanity from its animal past requires the replacement of a black-white apartheid of sex imposed at birth with a rainbow spectrum of gender selected at will. See, the problem when you're going to talk, if you want to talk about philosophy for a minute, you want to talk about linguistics and why that's just incoherent, because that's a category error. He's putting two things up here as though they are the opposites, but they're not opposites. They're in different categories. Sex is physical. It's there. It's something you see. It's something that is self-evident. Gender is not that. Right? That's, again, gender doesn't have a real clear definition, but see, that's the problem here. That's an incoherent statement. That's not a statement about science. It's not a statement about philosophy. It's just an incoherent ramble.
Transgender is the on-ramp for transhumanism, and he's a known transhumanist.
Yes, no doubt about it.
So he's like a wizard with words, and he's like a warlock, and he's got a way with language. And
what was it in the 90s? He wrote that. Was it a transhumanism bill?
Yeah, the transgender law internationally.
But he also didn't he write some transhumanist legislation also? That might not be him. It might be someone else.
I'm not aware of that, but...
Well, listen to this, right? He says, the origins of sex itself date back to the beginnings of multicellular life, right? So, right off the bat here, his theory is grounded in evolutionary naturalism. That's his starting point, right? That human beings, clearly, he believes, come from a single cell, right? There's no evidence for that. That is not empirical. No one's ever observed anything progressing from one cell to humanity, from one cell to a banana. These things were created. And that's the evidence. The evidence that we have is that these things are created, that human beings are created, but didn't come from apes. There is no evidence. There's no evidence to connect us with apes. That's why it's called the missing link. He says, as we explore the beginning of sex and the genesis of gender, it becomes clear. There, category error again, sex and gender. It becomes clear that for humans, sex is in the mind and brains are transgendered.
Doesn't this sound like Yuval Harari?
It does. It sounds a lot like him. I would say, I need to mention here too, Daniel Apologetics. He sent us a super chat just a bit ago, but he made a comment too that is exactly what we're talking about. He says, if the T in LGBTQ+ is true, right? So if transgenderism is a real thing, if it's true that gender is fluid, then there is no such thing as the L, the G, and the B.
Exactly.
Right? It makes no sense. There should only be the T. Right? He says no such thing as the L, the G. Even their name is a contradiction.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's good. He's got a chapter here about science and sex. We'll be coming back to this later because there's a lot of good points. You got anything from that you want to mention at this point?
Well, yeah, I think that they're doing all of this because they want to commodify the parts. We know that they want to guide reproduction wisely, as they put on the Georgia Guidestones. So this is their idea. They want to take reproduction away from people, and they want to be the one that is in charge of creating humans. And, of course, they're going to be selecting which features and characteristics that they want. So, there's that. And so, yeah, I'd encourage everyone to check out that documentary, Wrong Bodies. Apparently, it's done by an anonymous creator who's working with Jennifer Bielek. And so I'd suggest to subscribe to that channel and to, follow him.
All right, let's get back into the Cass report here. Here's some very interesting stuff. This is Helen Joyce, author and journalist Helen Joyce, discussing the recent Cass review and its revelations that medical treatment for children with gender confusion has rested on shaky foundations, and that's being kind. So let's go to the 26-minute mark and listen to what she says about. Well, just listen to this. This is amazing. And that, remember, with the lobotomy, no one has been asking the questions, right? Least of all, I guess, the parents who have been taking their kids in for this stuff.
All the talking points by now, and one of them is that regret after transgender surgery is less than regret after keyhole surgery on your knee. They'll say it's less than 1%. But I used to work as a statistician my degree is in maths and stats, and I did a PhD in mathematics, and then I worked for the Royal Statistical Society editing their magazine for some years. So although I wasn't somebody who did statistical studies, I was someone who used to have to explain them and write them up. And the first question you should always ask yourself about data is, how do they know? Like, I know, because it doesn't take long to find out, that none of the clinics anywhere in the world are following up their patients. So how could they know what the regret rate is? No, they don't know. And then they put out these studies, and when you look at the studies, first of all, they're just done online. Anyone who wants can fill it in online. So straight away, that's rubbish, because you haven't got any sort of a representative sample. You've got a biased sample. Doesn't matter how large the numbers are in that case. It could be 1 million people. If it's biased, it makes no difference. It's still a bad study. They are excluding, for example, one of the big studies that's often cited, very poor study, to say that there's very little regret, excludes detransitioners. Yeah. You have to currently identify as trans to be eligible to fill it in. That's the big one, I think.
So that's amazing, right? That the people who are having trouble, the people who are saying that, wait a minute, this doesn't work, are not allowed to give their opinion about it. And
that's just crazy.
And it's fascinating here that they're not following up with their patients when they do this. It's almost like they know this is not
Well, it creates
working.
lifelong patients.
Yeah. They're not going to follow up. They want.
Which, by the way, legislation just passed that here in the States, that states have to provide gender-affirming care.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance companies.
So the United States is behind on this one. The UK is out ahead on this one. Now here, listen to this, more about the fact that there is no evidence for this so-called treatment.
Feeling very, very well, and that's gone. So now there's no justification for using puberty blockers. There really isn't. There's no promise that it's going to help, no likelihood that it's going to help, and it's very, very risky. So that's the big one, I think. And then just the total, really very poor quality of both the care and the research. And the systematic review that she commissioned from the University of York looked at 103, found 103 relevant papers that fit the criteria. 2 of them were high quality. Now it was 50-something were medium quality, and that's fine. Look, medium quality can just mean they were a bit small, like as in not many participants. Lots of studies are medium quality. You combine them, and if you see that they tend to go one way, you actually build up a proper picture of what's happening. And just short of 50 studies were poor quality, and they were discarded, because if you include poor quality things, you're going to get a bad result. So they looked at the rest, and they didn't all point the same way or suggest any clear picture. They were all just very different. And what came out at the end was there's just no evidence base for this treatment pathway. Like, they've been doing it since 2006 or 7 in America, and in quite large numbers globally since. And they've been doing it, full throttle in the Tavistock since 2014, and they've no evidence for it. And just a priori, you would know that interrupting a child's puberty would be a very significant thing to do. And sterilising somebody, like sterilising a child, again, it's this diffuse thing. You say to yourself, well, they could come off the puberty blockers and go through their normal puberty, so I'm not sterilising them. But basically nobody does. About 9.
How about that? Now I found this particular point here. I think you'll agree that this is probably the most wicked part of the whole scam. Right here.
Last week, I have been so angry because I've allowed myself to feel the anger. Like the sheer viciousness of telling parents and teachers, if you don't affirm a lie in this child, the child will kill themselves, when there was no evidence for that, when it was false. It's downright wicked is what it is.
And at the same time, probably neither the parents nor the children had the risk of sterility explained to them.
No, because we know that came out in the Keira Bell hearing. So at the first hearing, they called the endocrinologist who headed the service where they would refer the children for their puberty blockers, and the lawyer who was representing that endocrinologist was asked what were the youngest kids they had prescribed puberty blockers to, and they had given puberty blockers to 3 10-year-old girls. And at 10, that's definitely early enough that if the child starts puberty blockers and then goes straight on to testosterone, that child will be sterile. Absolutely, definitely sterile.
There you go. That's what we've been saying here for a while, too. That's some of the information that we had early on.
And it's just the same tactics over and over and over again. Like, if you don't do it, you're going to kill your grandma. If you don't do it,
Just
you know,
like
you're
with
going to...
like with the COVID, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's always the same thing.
I didn't put those together, but that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's what we were told all through 2020.
And people died alone by themselves, and families were split apart, you know?
Yeah.
And I know people that happened to, and it's just absolutely unfathomable and evil and atrocious.
I want to share, we won't watch much of it because we're running out of time, but here is a video from Graham Linehan. He was one of those out there early on saying that what's going on here is grooming. So let's, let me see here. They don't really have timestamps here, but I think he says this early on in the video. Let's watch for just a moment, because he explains why it is absolutely grooming. It should not be happening. This used to be a crime.
So Graham, thank you so much for joining me. You're a BAFTA award-winning screenwriter and comedy writer, is that right?
Yep.
But I'm very interested in that you were one of the first kind of high-profile people in the public eye to speak out about what was happening at the Tavistock. Mm-hmm. Why do you think you were one of the first, and why do you think you spoke out when so many people didn't?
Well, I was very naive when I got into this, and I thought that as soon as people realised what was happening to children in the name of a very woolly ideology, everybody would rush to help, and my voice would be backed up by all the kind of supposedly feminist friends, progressive friends I've made throughout my life. And there was no one, you know. In fact, there was actually only one person, and that was an actor named James Dreyfus, who is also a star of sitcoms. And because he's similarly isolated, he's had trouble finding work, and he's been left spinning in the wind the way I have. But I just kind of thought, well, once people find out that children are being told that they will become boys are being told they will become girls if they cut off their penises, and girls are being told they will become real boys if they cut off their breasts. Once they find out that the medical complications that come with taking cross-sex hormones like testosterone for girls, the side effects include osteoporosis, early menopause. Everyone who's on testosterone, all these women who are on testosterone will go into early menopause, 30 years too early in some cases.
30 years too early.
Multiple sclerosis is associated with men taking cross-sex hormones. Wow. So I thought, well, all you have to do is tell people about all this, and it will, it will gather momentum, and people will try and stop it. But that was 6 years ago, nearly, and no one did. No one seems to care.
It's extraordinary. As I understand it, you were in contact with some of the early whistleblowers from the Tavistock. Can you say a bit about that and what sort of things they were telling you and how that came about?
Well, it wasn't really anything other than what they were saying when they were interviewed in reports by Lucy Bannerman in the Times, and there was a famous one where apparently there was a dark joke amongst doctors that soon there'd be no gay people left because they were all being trans, it was like just being in kind of WhatsApp groups with these people, I realised, I thought that, like, as clinicians who deal with children, that their words would be immediately kind of raised up by people in politics and the entertainment world, and and something would be done. But I found out that they were in exactly the same position I was. They lost jobs. They were put through employment tribunals. They were kind of continually investigated. And all because they were uncovering a huge medical scandal.
Okay, now I wanted to hear him talk about the grooming part. I had to try to find it. I bet it's right here. That's what he says about the grooming.
So I thought, let's defeat the evil. Let's defeat evil, which is a slightly high bar, and then we can go back to trying to be funny.
Okay. I mean, you were talking earlier about how the idea of it being kind of a grooming. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yes, there's so many. I think it's the perfect word. I was telling you earlier, there's a speech by a man named Alistair Gunn, and he was groomed as a child, and then as he grew older, he became someone who hunted down groomers online. He said one thing they do is they will establish a relationship with a young man, and they will say, yes, well, the reason you hate your testicles is because you're really a girl, and it might be sexy for you to hit your testicles, and just to see, I'll watch. right? So you have men who are literally online persuading these young men that they're girls so that they can get sexual pleasure out of fooling them and sometimes mutilating them completely. So that's like the hardcore literal definition of grooming. But there's other forms along the way that are carried out. Some of the grooming is even carried out by people who think they're being, incredibly good, but like it's, if you tell a child that it's even possible they were born in the wrong body, that is grooming, because it's not true, and you're implanting a dangerous idea in a child's head.
There you go. That's why it's grooming. If you tell a child that they're born in the wrong body, flat out, that's it. You're lying to them. Isn't it amazing? Sometimes you could think about this thing for years, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's so simple and true. The truth is simple.
Yes.
The truth is rarely complex. The truth is simple. If you tell a child they're in the wrong body, you're grooming them, because that's not true. And if you lie to a child,
well, and then there's the other part of this too, which is that think about the men that are funding this, right? And there's a lot of money invested, but who's actually getting the surgeries? Who's the demographic that's getting them? Young people, and they want to stunt their puberty, and so it's kind of it's locking them into childhood in a sense, like, and so it's like a perversion. It's like pedophilia, like you're grooming them also for, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you know where I'm
exactly.
heading with that.
That's what Graham was saying there. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really dark.
It's like you're raising up a generation of kids that are going to be permanently stunted, and that's one of your sexual fetishes.
It's crazy. Now here's another report from Michael Schellenberger. This is different, right? This is, do you know about this one? This was the WPATH files report. The worst medical scandal in history. The truth about gender-affirming care. I'll play a couple minutes of this. This is almost 2 hours long, so you should check this out. It's on
it's a really good one.
Yeah, this is Winston Marshall's YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty small channel, right? 43,000 subs. That's more than us, but that's
on
small.
The smaller side.
That's small, but this. He put together another big report, which is about a 70-page report about the information that they found here. This is a separate thing. So this is in the U.S. here. So this is something that's, let's see where it is.
This is from the Twitter files.
This is a kind of gay conversion therapy. There's many cases, particularly, in both, females wanting to become trans men or trans-identified men, and natal males wanting to become trans-identified females. Many of those folks are gay, and there's many cases where that they're actually responding to a homophobic family members or whatnot, who are uncomfortable with their homosexuality, and therefore they try to resolve that discomfort by suggesting that they're not actually men, or they're not actually boys, they're not actually females, they're actually the opposite sex, and so you see that it actually becomes its opposite.
Many is a bit of an understatement there. According to Hannah Barnes in her book, Time to Think, she cites some Dutch studies, but it's actually, in both cases, whether it's homosexuality or autism, it's over 90%. So it's not many, it's almost all cases are that. So it's a pretty shocking statistic. So maybe then we can go back to the WPATH or to Harry.
Let me stop it here, because I was looking back in the transcript, and here's the part we were talking earlier that gets a little graphic, and he does a very good job of handling this in a tactful way. That must be right here.
In my view, one of the worst medical mistreatment scandals in human history, and maybe the worst. I mean, at the end of the report, we compare it to lobotomies, ovarectomies, where the ovaries are removed. These are past medical scandals. We prohibited lobotomies when people finally understood what was going on.
So he says in here too, one of the main things he talks about is the fact that most of the kids, most of the young people that that fall into this have no idea. They don't understand the consequences of what they're doing. And that's why this is one of the worst things that's ever happened. He compared it again there to lobotomy. But I think this is the part that I wanted you to hear right here.
Back to their birth gender. These detransitioners obviously create a lot of cognitive dissonance, or maybe not obviously, but they do. They create a lot of distress and cognitive dissonance among the people performing, the people giving these treatments out. And you can see they're very concerned about it. I mean, one of the surgeons, by the way, describes being threatened by a former patient and, being worried about being physically assaulted. That's how angry detransitioners might understandably become when they realize that they
can understand.
Yeah, when they realize they can't have children, they can't have sexual pleasure, they can't achieve orgasm.
Not achieving orgasm, by the way, is there's an obvious reason why that's a tragedy, but there's also a less obvious reason, which is that if you can't achieve orgasm, you can't pair bond with a partner, which means there's only so far you can get in the profundity of your deep relationships, your deep partnerships in life. That's a seriously big issue.
It is. In fact, it had to sort of be explained to me. I admit this is a very sensitive issue. It's not, and I think it's interesting when you look at the people that work on this issue. It does tend to be more women than men. I think those of us that are men are a little bit less comfortable talking about these things. But yeah, you're right. It's something that.
Why is that it is more women than men?
I mean, I think women are more comfortable in general talking about sensitive issues. I feel like, for me, it was like, I think there was some sense in which, well, maybe the women can kind of take care of this, and we can leave it to the women to do. It's probably a sexist view, but nonetheless, I think it's a view that I had. Abigail Schreier wrote a book called Irreversible Damage. I saw her on Joe Rogan. I remember thinking that's very interesting. I heard her on Barry Weiss. I had to read her book twice, and it was very difficult reading. I'm a sensitive person in general, but the idea that we are doing these treatments, these so-called medical, mistreatments of people, it's so shocking to read. It's hard to actually. I found myself really interested in the psychology of the people performing those mistreatments. But to give you a sense of it, we get a glimpse into that psychology.
I'd like to, but one thing I'd like to posit that it might be the reason why women are overrepresented pushing this ideology is that it could be coming from a place of deep empathy, and women have higher traits of empathy.
That's a good point. That could be the case. But when your worldview is flawed, when your spiritual side is undeveloped, underdeveloped, or then your empathy is going to be twisted. It's not going to be you don't have a foundation for being empathetic. Some child says, I want this, and you feel for them, but you're not able to question appropriately whether or not that thing they want is actually good for them. Well, this is like the, woke ideology, right? This is part of it. It's this focus on social justice, this culture of victimhood, this idea of intersectionality. And feminism is an intersectional movement. Let's see. I want to share with you now, as we're going to finish up now, because what I want to do is I want to provide a critique of feminism, because a lot of Christians out there think that right now feminism is an ally of Christianity. And I will say that we're co-belligerents, that there are some places that we overlap, and I think the transgender movement is one of them, critiquing it. But we need to be, we have these conversations with feminists. We need to be loving them and telling them the truth. Feminism is resurgent right now. Many prominent feminists are rightly calling out this dangerous intellectual incoherence of trans ideology, but they're failing to acknowledge that feminism itself is also incoherent and is the seed from which the destructive weed of trans ideology has grown and proliferated. So I have another clip here I want to share with you, if I've got it. Yeah, I've lost it, but I'll be able to find it right quick. From a a male feminist writer who made a comment that just confounded me. I still am not sure exactly what he meant by it, but it's what it is. It helps you to see the confusion in the worldview. Let's see. So we go to 28. Here we go. Right about there. Hold it right there. This is not him here. It'll be up in a second. Public intellectual and male feminist author Robert Jensen. He makes a comment here that's amazing. You can be a real man or you can be a human being, but you cannot be both. I don't know. You listen to this and see if you can make any sense out of what he's saying.
Sure, we'll be watching this. A quick and easy solution. Can we wave a wand and get more men?
By the way, just so you know, this conversation they were having is about trans activists are intellectually incoherent. Right? That's what's going on here. That's their conversation. All right.
Have a go at thinking differently and looking at feminism like it's not their enemy or bad for them.
Well, you know, we can both point to a variety of activist projects and education projects that slowly do that. I was thinking many times through this conversation of a friend, also older now, who did batterer intervention groups.
So
I'm going to jump ahead here because I had it at the wrong point. I'm going to move up to about 30 right here.
And Jim Copland, who was 25 years older than me. And if not but for his example, I have no idea where I'd be today. It wasn't just that he lectured me on radical feminism. I watched the way he lived. And he lived those principles in a very deep and moving way. And so
pay attention to the ideology here.
Are politically active or not as men, whether we embrace feminism publicly or not, there is a way to do that. And as you pointed out, the alternative is to be a bystander who doesn't intervene. So the way we talk to not only our own boy children or, you know, boys in our lives, but the way we walk through the world matters a lot. When questions about pornography come up, are we willing to forthrightly say, oh, no, I don't use it, and I think it's a woman-hating practice, and here's why. All of these things...
Now this, just to jump in here now, see, we have that in common, except for the fact that what about the men that are destroyed from watching pornography? Just being addicted to pornography is destructive. It's a horrible... it's a horrible plague on our society. So you can't forget about the men in that either. So, again, we're talking about a feminist critique here.
Are part of the slow process of what we hope creates a more civilized world. There's no guarantee. The same process is going forward on race in the United States with progress and defeat and, back and forth. I don't have any new strategies. I certainly don't have a crystal ball. I know that the way that I've tried to live has not only, I hope, contributed to a movement, but it's made me a better person.
All right, listen
up. It's
up.
allowed me to live a deeper and richer emotional life. It's improved my relationships, not just with women, but with other men. And so, you roll the dice and hope for the best, but I think there is politics, there is education, and then there is everyday life, and they're all part of the project. And I hope when I die, people think, well, I made some contribution, but if nothing else, I know, my own life was improved by being willing to think about the way that the short-term material benefits of being a man in patriarchy were not worth giving up some of your own humanity. And in the end, that's what I tell men is, if you want to be fully human, you can be a real man or you can be a human being, but you can't be both.
I love that. I love that. You can be fully human or you can be a real man is the replacement T-shirt for this is what a feminist looks like. And Bob, I could talk to you.
All right, folks, I don't know how you took that.
That is so popular. It's like humans are conditioned to hate themselves, and we are constantly pelted over the head with the idea that we are a cancer to the earth. So it's this idea of being a good human or being a bad human.
Civilized society.
That's a very typical way of perceiving.
So he said there, you roll the dice and you hope for the best. What kind of worldview is that? There's politics, there's education, there's everyday life, and they're all part of the project, but I hope when I die, people think I made some contribution. If nothing else, I know that my life was improved by being willing to think about the way the short-term material benefits of being a man in patriarchy were not worth giving up some of your own humanity. And in the end, he says, you can be a real man or you can be a human being, but you can't be both. Now, on his website and his blog, Mr. Jensen has an article titled Radical Feminism, A Gift to Men, where he articulates this position in greater detail, and I still don't understand what he's trying to say here because it's very confusing. And ultimately, I want to say that I'm grateful that we have overlap with the feminist movement when it comes to something like identifying the fact that transgender ideology is incoherent. And, he's done some very good work, as have many second-wave feminists, fighting pornography, critiquing trans ideology and neoliberal wokeism. However, you heard right there, the incoherence of their feminism is astounding. They still advocate for issues like anti-racism. And if you didn't know, anti-racism is a trick. Right? Someone says, "Are you an anti-racist ally?" You might say, "Well, of course I don't." Yeah, of course I'm against racism. That's not the question. You're not being a racist and being an anti-racist are different things, because anti-racism, if you read our last article, right there, Recruiting Resentment, Engineered Uprisings on Campus, down here where Franz Fanon, where Summers' piece on Franz Fanon shows up here, you'll learn more about this. The idea, where you hear the term anti-racism today, comes out of this. Anti-racism is not being against racism. Anti-racism is against white Europeans. You're against the people you've identified as racists. You see the trick there, right? Of course I'm not a racist, but that's not what anti-racism is. Anti-racism is specifically focused on white Europeans who are the oppressors in this dialectical materialist paradigm that feminists are caught up in as well. They believe in tearing down the patriarchy, right? They describe traditional Christianity, specifically the biblical worldview, which prescribes a specific hierarchy for ordering society and male and female sexual relationships. They describe that as regressive. So the problem with feminism is, here we go. There it is. There's Franz Fanon. The problem with feminism, is they have failed to accurately self-critique their own position, which logically concludes in the undermining of traditional social structures that protect women. So are you putting two and two together here? The feminist movement is the seed from which the weed of transgender ideology blossomed from. And as they sit there today pointing at transgender ideology saying that's incoherent, as they sit in an incoherent position. The Bible is regressive, they say. It promotes slavery, patriarchy, and the oppression of women. That interpretation fails to consider the historical context of the Bible and the progressive revelation in the Bible itself. For example, Jesus' teachings elevate the dignity and value of women in contrast to the cultural norms of the Roman Empire at that time. John 4:27, and Luke 10:42. Also, Peter's admonition to husbands to love their wives, in that time, in the Roman Empire at that time, a woman had no rights in the marriage. The husband could literally kill her. and face no consequences for it. The Christian worldview changed that and made the two equal, not egalitarianism, but equal before God. They serve each other. There is an order. The woman submits, or the wife submits to the husband, and the husband submits to God. They both submit to God, but the husband leads the family, sacrifices for the family, even to death if necessary, the way Christ sacrificed for the church. That was revolutionary in the Roman Empire. So to look at the Bible as though it's anachronistic is, because we're progressive, we're better. Well, that's like C.S. Lewis's chronological snobbery, right? The assumption that newer ideas or ways of thinking are automatically superior to older ones. It just ignores ancient wisdom. They claim that progressive ideals, feminism, necessarily uplifts women. Well, that rests on an unexamined assumption about the nature of progress. Not all changes lead to positive outcomes. Some so-called progressive policies, some so-called feminist ideas have led to increased rates of depression, loneliness, and dissatisfaction among women. And so the dismantling of traditional structures like marriage, often labeled as oppressive or regressive, has not universally resulted in greater happiness or freedom for women. Data suggests that stable, supportive partnerships contribute significantly to personal and social well-being. So, as it turns out, God's design is the right one. It is good, very good. So this idea is called moral evolutionism. It's a trap, right? The idea that morality evolves as society progresses. That contradicts the idea of natural law itself, right? That's the idea that certain truths about human nature and morality are constant and unchanging, regardless of societal changes. But more importantly, moral truths, objective moral values and duties are grounded in the unchanging character of God, not the shifting sands of human cultures. All right, so even though we have some issues where we overlap with feminists right now, we have to be very careful, right? We want to make sure that they hear the as well. Because, if we're Christians, we love these people. We want them to know the truth. To know the truth that feminism logically concludes in this transgender ideology. Feminism will logically conclude in unhappiness. So if the idea is to uplift and protect women, feminism can't be the answer. Egalitarianism emphasizes absolute equality, right? Uniformity across all aspects of life. Roles, responsibilities, and outcomes everyone should have the same equal roles and responsibilities and outcomes, right? Equality of outcome. Any distinction or differentiation inherently leads to inequality and oppression, they will say. Biblical equality celebrates functional differences while upholding equal value and dignity among individuals. The biblical notion of equality recognizes intrinsic value in each person created in the image of God. Genesis 1:27. But that God designs different roles and functions for the harmonious working of society and the family. Paul discusses these distinct roles within the church in 1 Corinthians 12, saying the church is like a body with many parts, each having a unique function, yet each are equal in importance. That metaphor extends right out to the society and family structure, where different roles contribute to the stability and health of the community. So feminism and egalitarianism has consequences. One of those consequences has been one of the worst medical scams that the world has ever seen. The drive towards a form of equality that seeks to erase all differences, and that's feminism, can be harmful for women. So I'm saying to you here that feminism is the cause of what we've seen here, and feminism is harmful for women. And I want to say that, I want to speak that truth in love. right? Because we need to. Insisting that women should perform the same roles as men in all aspects of life disregards the biological, psychological, and social differences that are God-given and purposeful. And when we ignore these differences, then women can be placed in positions under undue burdens, right? Being expected to conform to standards or duties that don't account for their uniqueness. Unique contributions like motherhood, family life, the ability to nurture. Atomization, also. Feminism and transgenderism, it all leads to atomization. This radical individualism. It's a fragmentation that isolates individuals from families and communities that historically were there to support them. So this isolation can result in profound loneliness and a loss of identity, which is becoming epidemic in many societies. Summer and I were talking about this earlier today, the idea of identity. If we want to meet the feminist on some kind of equal ground or something that we can agree on, they're talking about, this is about identity, they say, and so do the transgender. How do we minister to these people? Well, identity. They think about identity a lot, so what we need to do to them is to impress upon them that your identity is not subjective. You're created in the image of God, and because of that, you have dignity intrinsically. You are special, right. Important, right? So we can meet them on that. That's a good place. That's what we call an open door for the gospel, or a pathway.
But right. We're made in the image of God.
Yeah, we were talking about this.
That's our identity.
Yeah, and so that's where we meet them, is that on the point of identity. So the breakdown of traditional family structures also, feminism has caused that. Or extreme egalitarianism, causes that. Radical feminism definitely causes that. And it weakens society. The family unit is the fundamental building block of society, with specific roles that ensure the healthy functioning of a family and then of a society. Ephesians 5:22-33 talks about the functions of a family. So the dismantling of these roles under this guise of progressiveness not only affects the stability of the family, but also affects the well-being of the children and the wider community. And as I'm going to say again, it hurts the women. The biblical worldview, Proverbs 31, praises the virtues of a capable wife, and her value is recognized and celebrated as a provider and a caretaker. Titus 2, you see where older women are encouraged to teach the younger women to be wise and pure. Again, back in Proverbs 31, verses 26-27, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. This is about balance. It's about personal virtue and communal responsibility. Ecclesiastes 4, 2 are better than 1. So individual well-being is deeply connected to the health of relational networks, not individualism. Proverbs 11:14 notes, where there is no guidance, a people falls. But in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. I'm telling you, folks, the Bible is true from cover to cover. They are the words of life. It's there. And we've got to share this with people in the world, because look how broken everything is. And we have this pure eternal truth. The Bible supports the idea that true strength and fulfillment are often found not in isolation, not in individualism, but in our connections with others. And those connections provide a foundation for a healthy, stable, and thriving society. The Bible promotes a profound respect for our individual differences. Equality in the Bible means equal value, not uniformity of roles. The strength of men and women are celebrated and harnessed for the benefit of all. Now, to take you out here on this, I want to share with you a biblical, I guess we'll call this, we could call this a devotion maybe, from the Book of Ruth. All right. Book of Ruth is a profound narrative about God's providential care and the roles and relationships prescribed by biblical principles. This text, Book of Ruth, it's a short book. You can read it. You can read it in about 15 minutes. This text can serve as a critique, obviously, of ideological feminism, and I'm going to show you how the Bible in the Book of Ruth is an argument against feminism, especially when you consider its claims and effects on societal norms that are designed to protect and uphold the well-being of women. So the narrative of the Book of Ruth revolves around the character, Ruth, and her mother-in-law, Naomi. Following the deaths of all three of their husbands, Naomi, she's the matriarch, she's the older one, she decides to return to Bethlehem. They were all living in Moab. So she decides to return to return to Bethlehem from Moab. And she urges her daughters-in-law there to remain in Moab and to remarry. So she's urging them, remarry. That's your safety. The two daughters-in-law, one is Ruth, the other's name is Orpah. So Orpah decides to go back. She goes back to Moab and stays there, but Ruth clings to Naomi. And in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, you see what Ruth says to Naomi. Naomi tells her, go back. She says, do not urge me to leave you or return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi leads her to Bethlehem, where she meets a man named Boaz. Boaz is a relative of Ruth's late husband, of Naomi's late husband. So Boaz marries Ruth. Naomi helps Ruth in this process in meeting Boaz, tells her what to do, how to go about introducing herself. And it was Ruth who introduced herself, so there you go, feminism. Boaz marries Ruth, providing her, and when he marries her, he provides her with protection. And it's not only for the good of Ruth, but it's also for the good of Naomi, who's acting as her mother here. It ensures Naomi's and Ruth's security and lineage, which ultimately ties in to the lineage of King David, and later, this is the bloodline of Jesus Christ. So the story of Ruth emphasizes the biblical worldview of a protective ordering of society. Ruth, who's a Moabite, of course, embraces the God of Israel and his design for her life. So there she's in this mimesis. She's seeing the world and she's conforming herself to the natural law of the world. In fact, she's conforming herself to the Word of God and his will and his way. So Ruth embraces the God of Israel and his design for her life, which includes for her to be integrated into a new community. God's will for her life is to remarry. Ideological feminism often critiques the biblical design for marriage and gender roles as regressive or oppressive. But in Ruth's story, you see something very different. You see how these structures provide protection and continuity for individuals and communities. So, dismantling marriage, as feminism really seeks to do, ultimately the logical conclusion, it would be that, because there is no attention to the role of a woman. So dismantling this framework of marriage could lead to the erosion of the stability of the whole society, and certainly would lead to the erosion of personal security. So this is why we see in our world today many women who are what we would call in a biblical sense are out in the world uncovered, on their own, egalitarian, individual. They're feminists, they're strong, but are they happier? Are they better off, really? Boaz in this text is called the kinsman redeemer. And that means that he's the kinsman redeemer in Ruth's life. That's critical. This is a critical point. So Boaz not only provides Ruth with immediate physical security. Boaz is a wealthy man. He has fields full of barley. He's got everything he needs. He's a wealthy man. He's got lots of servants. And Ruth comes straggling into town, and she's in a bad way. And he redeems her. He not only provides Ruth with immediate physical security, but restores her and Naomi's social status. You catching that? He restores their social status and ensures their future. This aspect of the narrative challenges all of this feminist critique of the patriarchy. In the biblical context, Boaz's patriarchal role is not oppressive. That's what they say, right? This traditional idea of marriage is oppressive. It's anachronistic. It's outdated. We don't need to do this anymore. Think of it this way. Understand this. The role of a husband is not to be oppressive. The role of a husband is to be redemptive and protective. So what they call oppressive, the Bible calls redemptive, protective. Ideological feminism's view of all patriarchal structures as inherently oppressive fails to recognize the potential for such systems to offer redemption and support within the scriptural framework. Ruth's integration into the community of Bethlehem underlines the importance of community, communal support structures over the idea of individualistic focus that's often found in feminist ideologies. And Ruth's acceptance and then her subsequent marriage to Boaz highlights the community's role in protecting and nurturing individuals, particularly widows and foreigners, which contrasts sharply with a modern emphasis on self-sufficiency and independence at the expense of communal ties. So the Book of Ruth does not advocate for an egalitarian removal of all distinctions between genders, as some forms of feminism would, and as certainly the logical conclusion of feminism, which is LGBTQ issues and worldviews. Instead, it promotes a world, it promotes a model and a world in which roles are distinct but equally valued, where each individual's contributions lead to the betterment of the whole community. Mutual respect between Ruth and Boaz, and Naomi's mutual respect between Ruth and Boaz, and then also Naomi's pivotal role as the mentor in Ruth's life. This illustrates a model of interdependence and respect that differs significantly from this radical feminist egalitarian model. So what we see here in the Book of Ruth is a compelling biblical critique of ideological feminism. It values God's protective design for societal and familial structures. It highlights the roles of redemption and community support, and obviously, and most importantly, divine providence. All of which stand in contrast to egalitarianism, individualistic and anti-structural tenets of contemporary feminist ideologies, one of which is transgender ideology. So in affirming the biblical design for men and women, God's purpose for humanity, Ruth is challenging, the Book of Ruth challenges modern feminist agendas that seek to dismantle these structures and suggest that what they're actually doing is undermining the very protections and provisions that empower and safeguard women. So isn't it interesting that the logical conclusion of feminism is to tear down the very system, structure that protects and empowers women? So this, what we see here in the Book of Ruth, encourages us to reconsider how biblical principles related to gender and society are far more nourishing and sustain both individuals and communities than these solutions, these empty solutions proposed by ideological feminism. Sadly, what Mr. Jensen said earlier, roll the dice and see what happens. No, we don't have to do that. I'd love to have the opportunity to tell him there is a better way. In fact, there is the way. And we encourage all of you to consider this. Now that we have some data, this conversation's probably going to ramp up. It's probably going to get heated and ugly at times, but we can meet them on the concept of identity, reminding them that what gives them value is not their idea of gender, not their individuality, but the fact that they are unique, created in the image of God. Well, that's all we've got for you tonight, folks. Let's remind you to check out, if you would, go read our article that we've got on Substack here, titled Fools Rush In, Recruiting Resentment for Engineered Uprisings on Campus. There's a lot of work in here. Couple pieces written by myself, a lot of pieces here written by Summer. The Franz Fanon piece is her. I've written here The Burnout of Manufactured Movements. That's our last show. And quite a few videos in here, clips for you to check out. Here's a timeline of the whole campus protest movement, why it started, what are the issues actually. And we've also got this part here, which is very, very inspiring, where Rory Wilson, who is the grandson of Doug Wilson, who was actually at Columbia, goes to Columbia, he and his friend Charles Beck stood down the mob. We've got some videos. You can check that out there. So that's all we've got. Sam, you want to?
Thank you. That was great. I love the Book of Ruth.
I do too.
That was a really good application of the situation as well.
Thank you. And I want, the Book of Ruth is special to Summer and I because it's very familiar to us.
Yeah.
And
it's part of our story.
Probably is for some of you too. That's all we've got for you tonight, folks. We look forward to being back with you soon. God bless, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism, is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.